watch Marty?
Meditating.
Yeah, okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, we're back again, and welcome back to everyone who's online, which is just about everybody except the three of us in the room. I'm hoping that when this is over, we'll go back to live face-to-face, and we won't get addicted to this remote Dharma, virtual Dharma program. In any event, we're working with the Avatamsaka tonight, and we're still looking at the verse that we were looking at last week. And again, I'm taking time, especially at the beginning, because some of these ideas and concepts are very, very rich and very new, and sometimes the translation is very preliminary and doesn't really get at not just the letter but the spirit of this. So it's worth just slowing it down, and since we have no place to go, being sheltering in place, we might as well just take the time to enjoy slowly going through this text. The line literally translated is, if someone moving towards or cultivating being in complete wisdom or perfecting their wisdom produces a mind, and we've been talking about this tonight, actually it's more like has an attitude or resolve or a thought even for transference, and yet sees this thought as really not being brought forth or produced, then it says someone will obtain great renown. So maybe we can look at this a little more closely. Last time we talked about transference. There's different ways of looking at this concept of transference and what it means. One we talked about last week, it's sort of like it's not necessarily a religious or Buddhist invention so much as is a response to the very nature of things as they are. In other words, because things are actually interconnected and mutually interpenetrating, not just on a physical level, which we know through science, but also on a relational and social, emotional level, that what someone who's working with transference is just working through an existing phenomenological construct and not inventing something, working with things as they really are, but actually consciously working with them. We are always in a state of transference for good or not so good, because that's the very nature of things. Everything we do and think and say in one way or another has an impact throughout the web, the interconnected web of being. And that's just the way it is. However, transference has more to do, or this bringing forth a mind or a thought of transference has more to do with realizing that and then making a conscious effort to work with it rather than opposing it or denying it. And maybe even in this sense, constructively working with it. So that's one level of it. The second level is it happens naturally with wisdom, and that's why that line previously, when it says someone moving towards a complete wisdom and understanding, insight, then would naturally, I guess the word is produce, but I would move more along the six patriarchs line. When you are moving towards wisdom, which really means that you're moving away from non-wisdom, because wisdom is said to be inherent and whole and complete. So a thought moving towards someone, towards all wisdom, is really working on eliminating the obstacles and impediments to the wisdom manifesting, which is said to be part of our complete whole nature. Therefore, when you are moving towards this wisdom, this thought of transference at various stages and degrees starts to happen by itself. The sixth patriarch expresses it this way, that the unattached mind, the mind that is not clinging or setting up anywhere, then naturally opens into full wisdom and full compassion. It's not something you have to bring forth. And that's why we never translate it as produce the mind that is nowhere attached or bring forth the mind that is nowhere attached. Rather, the meaning is let the mind be unattached. And being unattached is said to be our natural state. The attachment and clinging is brought about by the opposite of wisdom, not seeing things as they are. So when you say let the mind be unattached, essentially what you're saying, when it's in that state, then naturally transference arises because wisdom sees the interconnectivity of all things and all beings. So compassion is transference, and transference is compassion. More than a way of being it comes out naturally out of the awakening, and I won't even say the awakening experience, because that makes it sound like it's something, that you get in some kind of flash, or it's an altered state of consciousness. It really is a way of being. It's a new way of being that is no longer confused. And therefore, it's not a thought or a should. I should be transferring, or I should be compassionate, or I want to be. But it's actually second nature. You know that expression, second nature? Something becomes second nature to you in the sense that it is spontaneous, automatic, artless is the word we use in English, and effortless. So it's very close to the concept of Wu Wei that's used more in the Taoist tradition, of a kind of activity or being that is immediate, whole, complete, accomplished, and very, very natural in the sense that nothing artificial is obstructing it anymore. So that goes to something I wanted to share tonight, because I always like to share other things besides Dharma texts. So sometimes, tonight I'm going to use some poetry and literature, probably William Butler Yeats, one of my favorite poets, and then something from Shakespeare. But this idea that wisdom then naturally gives rise to compassion, and compassion is naturally the ground from which transference is 24/7 always emanating. It's not a toggle switch that now I'm going to transfer in on. Don't. Even at the end of the class, when we do the verse of transference and we consciously transfer, that's just a kind of catalyst to remind us that in a state of wisdom, seeing things as they are, we are naturally then also automatically in and activating in a state of compassion and transference. And it's almost, that's what it means to be second nature. It's not something that's acquired or having to be contemplated, but it is something that's naturally arising. And Shakespeare, I'll just give you the first line of this because I want to go into this a little more. But he says, and this is from, well, I'll let you guess. You can guess where this is from, what Shakespeare play. Goes like this: the quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. He's talking about mercy, but that's an English translation. You could use the quality of compassion. Quality of kindness and compassion is not strained. What does not strained mean? I got two people here that I can ask, so I'm sure all those of you in line have some responses. Not strained. The quality of compassion is not strained. Any?
It's not something you have to work for.
Right. It's not something you
force. You don't force it.
It's not forced. It's not stressful.
Yeah.
It's not an effort. The quality of compassion is not an effort. Therefore, when we talk about compassion fatigue, we are actually talking about mercy that is strained, and that's why it leads to fatigue. So he's saying the real quality of mercy, it droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. This is a wonderful metaphor, is that when the clouds are full, conditions are right, the rain just naturally falls. It's not strained. It's not an effort. And on the place beneath means all that lives. I'm going to go into this a little more. This is only part of it because I think it also, this soliloquy from Shakespeare also works in the idea of renown. So I'm going to come back to that in a while. So where's it from? Anybody? Nobody wrote online. Oh, people online are cheating. What they do is they go to their phones, they Google it, and then they find it and bring it back in. But if you're not doing that,
Sonnets, I do.
anybody? No? Merchant of Venice. Okay. Another way that transference manifests is it's spiritually indirect. Now I'm working on this spiritually indirect. In other words, if you really cultivate yourself, by cultivating yourself, you change your mind, and by changing your mind, you change the world. So there's an effect between what we think to what we say, what we will, what we do. And what we do then becomes the causes and conditions of the way the world goes. So this is very, it's sort of a chain of causality here. So when you change your mind, when you cultivate yourself and you get rid of greed and anger and stupidity, by changing your mind, what you put out in terms of your actual karmic actions, your intentional actions, and even when you're not acting, when you think you're not acting, even your emotional, mental state has a profound effect on the environment and the world around you, for the people immediate to further and further away. So when you change your mind, it changes your words and actions, and this in turn changes the world. And for sure, it's purposeful and it's mindful. This is what I would call spiritually indirect. In other words, it is moving in a chain of causality. And this is a really important concept for something my teacher would stress with us. He says, you all wish for world peace, but how can you have world peace if you don't make first peace in your own mind? And how do you make peace in your own mind? You stop fighting. How do you stop fighting? You see through the emptiness of things and the emptiness of self that wants to get and acquire and have. And by doing that, when the fighting stops, peace naturally arises. This is very interesting. Again, it's based on this. You don't have to make peace, you have to stop making war, in a sense. Fighting with yourself, fighting with others, fighting with the natural world. When that fighting stops, naturally peace arises, because that's the natural state. So let the mind be unfighting and peace naturally arises. This then is a more spiritually indirect one, but it's one in terms of Buddhism, engaged Buddhism, what we talk about. It's actually at the heart or the core of engaged Buddhism, because what it means is to be engaged in the Buddhist sense is, first of all, to recognize that you are always engaged. There's no disengagement. Given the nature of things, there's no way to disengage. There's only different ways of being engaged. And this way of purposely thinking, I'm going to make the world a better place by first and foremost making myself a bit of a pure land, making myself a bit of a way place, making myself a kind of ground of awakening. And by doing that, even if you don't intend to, you will spiritually indirectly change the world. Now, if you purposely wish to do it, that's fine too. But even purposely wishing to do it won't happen unless you purposely do it yourself, on yourself, through yourself. So this is so you can, in a sense, don't waste your energy lamenting and getting pissed off and fighting that the world is a mess. Because the only leverage you have on making that less so is in the very ground of your own being. Now, I don't want to say all you have to do is cross your legs and meditate and you're changing the world. You are, but that's not what spiritually indirect means. What this engaged Buddhism means is that is the beginning of the profound change you hope to accomplish. If you don't start at the right place in the beginning, you'll be off 1,000 miles in the end. Instead of making world peace, you'll just make another form of war. I won't go into details. That's been my personal experience. Often, without changing the heart and the mind, the further and the more deeply you get engaged, the more of a mess you make of things. On the other hand, just changing your heart and mind, if you go no further, already you've made an improvement. But if you can carry that out into a larger dimension, then it's almost limitless in terms of its impact. So I'm not saying that this is the end. I'm saying it's the beginning, this changing of the mind. This sometimes is called bodhicitta, the resolve to change and correct the mind towards awakening. And there's another level too, and this is what I would call the spiritually direct as opposed to the indirect. that's a little harder to wrap our minds around without a direct experience of it. So I will present it, but I won't say, I can do this, or I have this ability, or can explain it other than textually. But it's something that apparently individuals who cultivate profound awakening and wisdom and compassion can, with a direct intentionality, transfer merit and virtue and goodness and blessings out through the larger world in a very direct, immediate way. So it's not indirect by slowly changing myself, I have this impact, da da da. It's actually a kind of powerful direct transference. Examples of this might be, and I hadn't thought about this before, but if we look at the text at the beginning, the Buddha, let me see, I'd have to draw that up.
Which page?
Yeah, I have to pull up my, I'm saying this appears right in the beginning of the, okay, here we go. Right in the beginning of the text you have, at that time the world, from the bottoms, the wheels on the bottom of the feet, the world underwent, released billions of lights, illuminated the 3,000 great thousand worlds. The releasing of light is a form of transference. It's direct. In other words, the Buddha's taking his accomplished merit and virtue, his accomplished powers that come from clarity of mind and clear conscience. And the form it can take is a light. So you could say, well, you could read this metaphorically and say he's just sharing his wisdom by releasing light. But apparently the texts say this is, in fact, literal and not just metaphorical. It's not figurative, it actually occurs. So maybe at some level we don't see it, we don't understand it, and we have to take it as a hypothesis. But the text is talking about quite something, and so it's sort of imaginary or poetic until you directly experience and know it, and then it's not so indirect. So this would be one way that there's transference. Sometimes great teachers transfer in an embodied way all the time, so that when you're in their presence, you're not quite sure why, but you feel this effulgence of light and purity and uplifting energy, as if it were almost palpable. You could reach out and touch it. Your thoughts change, your feelings change, your fears and anxieties start to lessen, and you're bathing in a transferred energy that comes from someone who is on this path. So this is, maybe some of you have had this a little bit, but that's what I'm talking about, a direct transference. It's happening immediately in the here and now, and it's something that certain people can do in a very direct way. I would also say that the text we're looking at is a transference. We are the beneficiaries of an act of transference that spoke this text, that this text was written down and transcribed, brought across the centuries and translated, and now tonight we're looking at it on a screen. But what you're seeing is an act of transference from a distant source right directly to us now. So in a sense, if you want to engage in transference, you would also think about really getting involved in translation. Because translation is a very direct and immediate way to transfer, to take the merit and virtue, and you say, may all who see and hear this resolve on Bodhi. Behind the act of transference is that all who hear and see it are changed and transformed in a way. So this is just another way of looking at it. Okay, so I will go on a little bit, maybe 10 more minutes, and then I'm going to ask one of the Dharma Masters here to come up and share the podium. And we're going to do this in a regular way starting tonight. I want to go back to this thing. We had Shakespeare saying, it falleth as a gentle rain. I was really, when I read this, I was really struck. I was saying, where else did I see the rain and the rainwater being a kind of metaphor for, you know, wisdom and transference and compassion? And then I finally discovered it today. I was going through the Platform Sutra. And in there, Wei Nung is describing the wisdom. And again, wisdom is an act of it doing. It's not a good wisdoming. It's something that's done. It's not some abstract thing. And he says, this wisdom that comes from cultivating yourself is like rainwater. It's very interesting. Whose moisture enriches all beings, all plants and trees, all those sentient and insentient beings. So just like Shakespeare, it's not strained. It's like the gentle rain that falls from heaven upon that beneath. And then the text continues, 100 streams flow together into the ocean and there merge into a single body. The wisdom of prajna, the fundamental nature of living beings, is also like this. So here he's talking about wisdom, compassion, transference as part of the fundamental nature. When it's functioning, when it's operative, it's just like rainwater that falls and nurtures all. So it's just a kind of idea. I'm trying to bring this out to show that these ideas are not limited to what we call Buddhism. That in moments of inspiration, last week we did John Donne, tonight we're doing a little Shakespeare. You can see these sensibilities, these sentiments, I would say these wisdom insights are somewhat universal and universally applicable. Anyhow, let me just go on then to this idea of not being produced. Not produced means not strained, if I could say it that way. In other words, it arises naturally and spontaneously, and it's so much so and seems so natural that in this state, you're not really aware that you have done this or had this thought. In that sense, it's even before reflexive. It's just, like the gentle rain. I'm trying to find another way to express this. But what this passage of text is getting at is that these qualities of compassion, kindness, transference are all really our true nature, and they arise spontaneously when there's nothing impeding or obstructing them. And therefore, when you're in this state, you really are not even aware that you're, quote, in that state, because that would be a kind of awareness that there's not that state. And that earlier passage, I want to go back and see if I can get that, because there was a very difficult passage we had in the earlier part. In one of the verses, it's the first one. If someone sees the one of proper enlightenment is liberated, free from all outflows, that person's not really seeing it as it is. And it goes on, if someone knows the thus comes marks and body do not really exist, and this person really understands. And basically, this is a repeat of that. In other words, seeing it this way still has a contrast. It's still what you'd call a binary. Enlightened, not enlightened. This world, other worlds. Produced, not produced. And it's saying someone who's in this state is even beyond that. It is so natural and so effortless that there's not even this thought. Because having a thought would be then previous to that you didn't have that thought, which means it hadn't been fully realized in you. It's still been an on and off thing. Very much like if you go to a meditation session, by the 6th or 7th day, you're clear. And you feel a kind of imbued, like you're saturated with the incense of awakening and clarity and whatnot. And then you leave the monastery, you go out, within 6 minutes, it's unproduced. It's turned off again. So this means that while you got a flavor and taste of it, it hadn't become fully embodied, fully realized. And therefore production, non-production, or bringing forth, losing it, is still the state. But in this state, what this is being talked about is that true wisdom, true compassion doesn't have this quality of being produced or lost. It's always there. And it's so always there, it's like you're breathing. You're not aware really that you're breathing, but in fact you are breathing. You don't produce breath and then stop. You don't inhale and exhale and you think I produced a breath, no, I don't produce a breath. It's just, it happens by itself. That kind of thing. So I'll stop here on this part because I want to begin to start sharing the Friday night lecture, especially with the Avatamsaka, with the monks at the Buddhist Berkeley Monastery here. So every Friday night, they're going to do tag team for a while, two of them taking turns talking. But this is how I started out too with my teacher. We would sit next to him and he would talk for a while and then ask us to talk. We never got heads up that we were going to have to talk, so we couldn't prepare. And when we prepared, sometimes I would exquisitely prepare, and then I'd never be asked to talk. And I'd be sitting there waiting, thinking, I got a really great talk ready. Come on, ask me. Never get asked. So finally I just give up and say, he's never going to ask me, I don't care. And I'd say, space out and zone out. And then he'd turn me, what do you mean lecture? And of course it wasn't on anything I'd prepared. So that's not the case here. We already agreed that every Friday night one of them would take a turn on the text. So tonight I think Jin Weisher is going to talk. Were you going to come up here?
No.
Yeah, then we can just turn the camera, right? Okay. So while he's getting set, I maybe just do a short introduction. And yeah.
Maybe sit right there. There's a mic right there.
But he can't be seen.
We can move the camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the mic is here. You're going to move the camera, right?
Move the camera.
Okay. So Jin Weisher is now a bhikshu, fully ordained, originally from Poland. Where in Poland?
East, north part of Poland, close to Belarus border.
Okay, so he's from northern Poland. He's just in his last semester of completing his master's degree in Buddhist classics at Dharma Buddhist University.
Yes.
And I hope you will finish.
I hope to. It's not easy.
Yeah, well, it's particularly challenging now because we've gone to remote online. So all the classes are meeting in a remote way. And hopefully this will be the start of a long career in Dharma. But tonight I invited him to talk, so it's yours.
So welcome everyone. Please forgive me any mistakes that I can make, and this is a kind of new thing to learn for me, and I take it really as an opportunity to learn and serve as much as I can. And I also want to share these few things, but which I learned at being in the program as well. And being in the program at debut, I see this text come alive in a completely different way, and it's kind of seeing them in the new light. And what Marty mentioned today about the idea of not being produced, I kind of, from today I was try to contemplate this idea, not production, and later even text saying about the living beings are without production and also without extinction. What is there not easy concept to kind of penetrate and understand immediately. And as we're seeing that if someone in the beginning of the verse, if someone towards all wisdom, and like Marty mentioned, it for me was very liberating to see the cultivation as a process of cultivating is a very kind of ongoing process of doing. It's not like I get it and I understand. It's almost all the time thought by thought. And later is produced, see the minds is not being produced. So for me, this saying to me, like Marty mentioned about Six Patriarchs Sutra, and one of the key lines of the Six Patriarchs Sutra saying that I can say this kind of core of the mechanism of cultivating that previous thoughts not clinging to sensory states, succeeding thoughts are not attached to the state, are Buddhas, and previous attached to the states are living beings or attachment. And what I start reflecting, what means not producing, but what means producing, really. And the producing is the moment of what is the core of this teaching, and I think right now we are in the sutra of this kind of concept of emptiness, what means concept of how to be unobstructed, unattached, uncling to anything. And I start closely look at how we create this production, how we create this cleaning. And we just right now at Avatamsaka Sutra at the RBU, we are studying actually chapter 26, what is the 10 grounds or 10 stages. And we are at the chapter, I think the stage number 5, we are exploring the idea of paticca samuppada, dependent coordination, or 12 links of coexistence. And especially interesting for the way, and this text described the moment by moment how we cling to things, how we create attachment around things. And especially a key moment in this texts, in these 12 links, is the moment when they describe as feelings arise when we are in the contact of things, of our thoughts, is the Vedana. So Vedana is described as a like, don't like, or natural. And immediately, for instance, if something is attractive for us, we move to the next step, what is craving, what is described as thirsty, or trishna, thirsty, what is we're very into it, we really want to take it. In this stage, it's almost impossible to stop the mind, what is very into get something. And as a result, we have the upadana, what is means craving with attachment. And what is very interesting, so after the next step, after attachment is becoming. So means producing, right? Becoming, and the birth come out and the die come out. And it's after that, as a kind of natural process, and we can see as a process of coming from the birth to the death, as a kind of upgoing process of reincarnation. But we also can see this as a moment by moment, how we psychologically, Marty says, create our world. And especially right now, I can see, probably we experience a lot of, the text later saying about being without production and extinction. So we will probably a lot of experience extinctions more, what means more kind of feel kind of lost on grave, in the sense that we cannot do any more things what we used to do. We cannot, for instance, if we plan to go to some holiday somewhere, the event is cancelled, right? It's like, is painful to some extent. But we can notice how this whole process is starting from the very beginning. When we, for instance, do something online, we can notice this movement of the mind. And we have some interesting in Amazon, maybe, interesting thing to buy. We just click. And this moment of clicking, that I like it, I want it, and I attached. And with this cleaning immediately becoming, we become like, ooh, I feel alive for a moment. So for instance, it was the nice travel to Hawaii, for instance, going to holiday. I can say, yes, it's wonderful. I want to go there. I want to spend my time and be around wonderful landscapes and so on. But if something change and we have, of course, no control of it, we have a sense that we lost something, right? And immediately kind of feel of disappointment arising in us. And we can see this moment of becoming, of producing, of something when create the attachment or our consciousness is like obsessed by it. It's very kind of, it's taking over of our consciousness. And it's not so much space to be compassion in this sense. So in the moment, let go, we kind of open a little bit more space to see what's going on around us. And we have a perspective to do something. And so same like Six Patriarch says, if our succeeding thoughts not attached to the states are Buddha or awakened being, so we still have a choice, but we can see how is dynamic this process, how these thoughts arising, and how often we clinging, and it's not so much space to this natural compassion arise and function normally. So maybe I offer this for short consideration.
Okay. I'm going to maybe switch around again. Hello? You?
I'll move the camera.
Yeah.
It's on you. It was still on you.
Oh, is it? Well, then that's fine. I thought we had a... It's a
Both of you. On both
oh,
of you.
okay.
But we can make it specifically on you.
Good. So every Friday night we'll continue to do this. Next week, Jin Chuanshi will add to the Friday night class. Eventually we want to make Friday night kind of the Avatamsaka. The Avatamsaka is so big, so at least until I pass away, we'll never finish it. And there's a better chance if I pass away of finish it because I go so slow. But that being said, I just really want to open the forum up more for this chance to share and talk. So the other thing I wanted to do in the time that's left is many years ago when I first started out, my teacher, Master Hua, encouraged Heng Sure and I to keep a journal, a daily journal of our thoughts, reflections. I wouldn't say necessarily insights, but specifically around connecting the principles of the teachings, the text, into the actual specifics of our life. And so we did this on the highway, but I continued, I think I'm sure as well, we've continued to do this throughout the years. And tonight I was just going to read you a section from my ongoing journal as I was reflecting on the immediate situation of that's been brought about by the coronavirus pandemic. So I'm just going to read it. I'm not going to make a comment on it, but this is sort of to share with you, and you may not find it interesting, and I may not do it all the time. I thought just tonight I'd give you a little sense of what I do when I'm trying to write. So there's this wonderful poem by William Butler Yeats, and it starts as, he says, "The world is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. We see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon." And what he means, the world is too much with us. He doesn't mean the natural world. He means the world of getting and spending and accumulating and video games and IPOs and this whole thing is too much with us, late and soon. Getting and spending, acquiring and transferring, trading, whether it's in our thoughts, our emotion, our feeling, this constant back and forth, we actually lay waste to our powers, our intrinsic powers. This is a wonderful poetic expression of outflows. If you want to say what is in English, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have lost touch with nature. We don't identify with it. And then we've given our hearts away, this natural heart, and it's a sordid boon. It's not really a prize. It's sort of a sorry victory. So my writing, my journal started with that Yeats poem, and I wrote this. Yeats wrote, "The world is too much with us now. but maybe it's more true to say that we are too much with the world now. But it amounts to the same sentiment. We've intruded, dominated, bullied, and beat up the planet, milked the natural world to the point of exhaustion. A Buddhist metaphor likens the virtue of patience, one of the 6 paramitas, to the great earth, able to forbear and endure all things, and to the ocean that can absorb and accept without limit. But these metaphors came from a time when humans were fewer in numbers, lesser in powers, and smaller in their footprints. So, I jump ahead then. Ironically, the shelter in place, the stopping of the world, has in little ways brought back to life the very precious, underappreciated things of a meaningful life that we've sacrificed in the frantic pursuit of getting and spending. Going back to Yeats's poem. And now on a more personal reflection of my daily life. In the morning I do Tai Chi alone in the parking lot of a nearby Carmelite monastery. It's only 3 blocks from my house. I can hear the bird song again, feel the real wind, not the artificial breezes of cars and planes and BART. Cars and planes and BART, people's activity, generate a wind. That's gone now, so now I can feel the real wind that isn't generated. I can hear my heartbeat and my pulse throb as I do the Tai Chi movements. I can hear a squirrel nibble on an acorn. I sit in Chan in the morning where the surround silence makes every day seem like Sunday. Outside, I encounter people actually hanging out with their kids, walking and talking, dogs in trail or romping ahead, people stopping to converse, even at 6 feet apart, more close and intimate than before social distancing was enforced. In fact, the social distancing has paradoxically brought people closer together. Outside. Mothers throwing baseballs with their sons, children climbing trees and making up games, families forced to be families instead of scattered about jigsaw puzzle pieces and drifting islands. All of a sudden, with the threat that any moment we might not see each other again, we are seeing each other for the first time. Looking up at passing faces, noticing 100 myriad things we never saw or heard or felt before. In a word, we're becoming human again. Real, not extensions of devices and deadlines and hidebound determinations. A version of the Buddhist practice, Zhiguan, stopping and contemplating, or pausing and reflecting, or just unplugging and attending to the here and now. And the text says, when one attends to the here and now, the false returns to true. Also today I was rereading. There's books that I've been looking at, literature that talk about pandemics and plagues, and it's quite rich. And I put together a reading list for some of my students. But I've been kind of inspired again to read in areas of meditation and solitude, and not necessarily Buddhist. So I went back to one of my favorite, which is Henry David Thoreau, Walden Pond. And actually I saw that Thoreau viewed Walden, his place at Walden, a simple cabin, less as a defensive necessity than a place of opportunity. And in this, I saw a possible take we could do for the coronavirus. Instead of seeing our isolation as a defensive necessity, as a place of opportunity, where he could do what he could not easily do in the everyday world that is too much with us later soon. Namely, concentrate, focus, attend, listen, reflect, and rediscover what really matters. This was his goal in going to Walden. Full receptivity then, rather than full activity, receptivity, removal of what he called the ego-driven clamor of the noise of the world, the ego-driven clamor, which was how in his most stressed moments he viewed human discourse. And then this wonderful line, we must first succeed alone that we may enjoy our success together. I really love that line. We must first succeed alone that we may enjoy our success together. In other words, as my teacher said, the greatest things begin in the smallest of places. So as you were talking, in your text tonight passage, going to the smallest places, nailing that down, cultivating oneself so that you have a kind of self-mastery that isn't just whipped around anymore. First succeeding in that solitary alone work, then we can enjoy success together because it's taking all those. So the last part of this reflection was, Disasters big and small, within and without, arise from the mind, and only the mind can avert them. The biggest things begin in the smallest places, and the smallest places invariably lead to the biggest things. The sheltering in place, the lockdown, can be seen as a loss, a misfortune, or it could be seen as a gain, time and space to return to the root and go back to the source, and a blessing. We are forced to stay at home, and in this one sense, reminded of an ancient poem by Tao Yan Ming, who begins, "I'm going home, my fields and gardens are choked with weeds, why should I not return?" And then of this last poem that I'll share with you, and this again is from William Butler Yeats, but it has in it a spirit of a joy and a liberation that comes from solitude, just as Tao Yan Ming's poem does, and that even if it's forced upon us, one can, I would dare say, enjoy it, but at least think about grabbing it as an opportunity in Thoreau's sense that it's not simply something that's forced on us from necessity, but an opportunity. And the other thing I would say, and this is what my neighbors have been saying to me too, as we talk at 6 feet distance, especially the ones that are with their kids again or out walking in nature again, and they basically said, you know, if this coronavirus hadn't come, I don't think I would have stopped to shift. I don't think, because the habitual energy that carries us is so strong. We keep saying we'll do it. I'm going to go on that retreat. I'm going to go into a quiet backpacking trip. I'm going to sit in meditation on the weekend. And yet, mañana, mañana, siempre mañana. We keep putting it off. So in a sense, almost, it's like in order to tap into our true nature, sometimes we need a push or a shove or a door closed. So this is his poem. I really like it. I won't have time to unpack it tonight, but I want to share it with you. And even if you don't get all the metaphors and allusions of the poem, allow yourself to feel sort of the joy and liberation and fullness that he's finding by shutting down, sheltering in place, and pulling back. This poem is called The Lake Isle of Innisfree. I will arise and go now, and go to Innisfree, and a small cabin build there, of clay and wattles made. 9 bean rows will I have there, a hive for the honeybee, and live alone in the bee-loud glade. And I shall have some peace there, for peace comes dropping slow, dropping from the vales of the morning to where the cricket sings. There, midnight's all a glimmer, and noon a purple glow, and evening full of the linnet's wings. And again, I pause here to say, in the morning now with all the traffic and quiet down, I hear the bird's wings again. I can feel this slow dropping of the peace in the not so much what is, but in this precious, exquisite value of what is not. And finally, his last line, I will arise and go now. For always night and day I hear lake water lapping with low sounds by the shore. While I stand on the roadway or on the pavement's gray, I hear it in the deep heart's core. And at this last line, I hear it in the deep heart's core, even when I'm in the midst of things, is almost like what the opportunity of the shutdown, shelter in place provides us. We're still in the middle of things. We still have, the pavement's gray, to so to speak, the streets and whatnot. But we also have this wonderful opportunity enforced on us in some way to listen to the deep heart's core, to hear the liberation and the joy that can only come from being at peace with one's true heart, one's true nature. And it's like it's always there. It's in what he says, it's in the deep heart's core. But unless we stop the busyness, we never drop down into the deep heart's core. We're always skimming the surface. And I think this is what the sixth patriarch meant by a frantic passage of getting and spending through life, he says, ends in bitter regret. And sometimes getting out of that takes a little nudge or a shove or maybe even a little shock. So this is sort of the kind of writing I've been doing over time, reflecting on current conditions or the conditions and using passages and so forth. So wanted to share with you tonight. And that's it. And we'll pick up again next week with the Avatamsaka. Any announcements or?
Yeah, so as you know, our monastery is shut down too. We are shelter in place here, but we kind of create the virtual Buddha hall. So every day from the early morning, we start at 5 a.m. for morning ceremony. You can join us online, and you can sit in meditation. The monks here sharing the reflections, and after meditation, and we do at noon every day Guanyin chant and Amitabha's chant, and we have evening ceremony at 6:30, and every day are some lectures in the evening, afternoon, and also our other guest teachers offered online classes like James Barras or Stephen Taylor or Kevin Griffin. And Monk Heng Sure will lecture tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. About Avamtasaka Sutra. And yeah, so we are pretty busy here at the monastery actually.
But not getting and spending, it's a different kind of business.
it is.
Okay, speaking of transference of text, we're going to do our transference verse now, and hopefully all of you who are online maybe could just palms together and do it along with us in English.
May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace, with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bowing respect to the triple jewels,